Isolated. Good morning and welcome to the special meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission. Today's date is Wednesday, September 18th, 2024. This meeting will now come to order and we'll begin with a moment of silence. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance. Madam City Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Yes. Apking?
Here.
Botana?
Here.
Marker?
Here.
Zeverson?
Here.
York? Martin? Summers? And members King and Schwartz have asked to be excused, and I will mark them so.
Thank you. Okay, as this is a special meeting, we'll go ahead and jump to the business items. Item 6A, Ordinance 6524. I believe does the applicant have a presentation of the city?
Yeah. Well, the city has a presentation. We're not the applicant, but I can go through my presentation, and then the applicant can go through theirs.
Fantastic.
All right. Just pull it up. Okay, let's see here. It is not the PowerPoint is not cooperating with me momentarily. Here we go. All right. Good morning, commissioners. Sorry for that. For the record, Chad Boyko, principal planner with the city's planning division. Before you this morning, we have Ordinance 65-24. This is a privately initiated future land use classification amendment request. The applicant for this is Jimmy Masarwa. The location of the property is the southwest intersection of Embers Parkway and El Dorado Boulevard. I believe the exact parcel address is 107 Southwest 24th Avenue, or Southwest 24th Place. The size of the parcel is 10,000 square feet, so it's your typical 10,000 square foot property that you find scattered all throughout the city. It's currently within the Urban Services Reserve area of the city, which means that there are not utilities on that site, nor are there any utilities planned within the next expansion phase. You'd be looking at utilities going up into this area probably in the next 3 to 5 to 7 years or so. So it's a little ways out. The applicant's request is a change from the future land use map designation of commercial professional to the single family residential or SF designation. If you look at the map here on the surrounding area, you can see that this is one of those types of blocks that runs perpendicular to a collector roadway. Most of the properties are scattered 10,000 square foot properties. There is an alley right of way that runs in the middle of this block. And then you can see that this property is undeveloped. There are 2 single family homes that are located to the north and to the south. And then to the east across that alleyway, you do have a string of 3 undeveloped properties. As you go further north within this block, you see more of a collection of undeveloped properties in this area. Across the street, we'll look at the zoning and land use. You can see that this block and also the block that is directly across El Dorado Boulevard are both designated as commercial professional. This was done back in 2019. Blocks to the south and then to the west are designated as single-family, multifamily, and then the blocks you don't see it on the map here, but the blocks to the north are also designated as one is single-family and one is commercial professional. So some quick findings of fact. The site, as we mentioned, is 1 parcel within Southwest Cape Coral. These changes to the commercial professional land use classification were done back in 2019. This was part of large-scale changes that the city had taken place in order to sort of coincide with our new land development code that we had adopted at that time. with that change, that was one, since we were doing sort of massive whole-scale changes to our code, and throughout the city, we were changing land use designations, zoning designations. This block was identified as a block that was at a commercial intersection, which we define as the intersection of 2, 4, or more lane streets. When we look at those blocks, we'll get into this a little bit later. When we make those changes, we're looking at a low sort of residential development pattern. If you find a block that is 70 or 80% developed with single-family homes, the likelihood of those blocks ever being developed as commercial gets low because it's difficult to acquire the homes, knock them down, assemble properties, things like that. This block was identified as one that, while the southern portion of the block did have some single-family homes, as you got further north, you saw a number of undeveloped properties that could have possibly be acquired and then turned over as a commercial development. So, carrying on, we found that through our research that the owner purchased this property in 2023 as part of a tax deed sale, so that was about 4 years after the land use has changed. Staff notes that the zoning of this property, even though the land use has changed to commercial professional back in 2019, staff has not yet rezoned this property to commercial or professional office, so the zoning remains a single-family residential. The owner attempted to submit a building permit for a single-family home on this site, and it was thereby rejected due to the CP future land use designation. As most of you know, within our codes, we have a clause that states that in order to develop something, whether it's commercial or residential or industrial, the future land use and the zoning have to match up. And in this case, with a commercial professional land use and a residential zoning, it did not match up, nor would we allow for a single-family home to be developed on property that has a commercial professional future land use because the use doesn't jive with the land use. So in order to perhaps build a single-family home on this property, the owner has applied for this map amendment to change the property to single-family residential. So we looked at this request based on our analysis of our comprehensive plan. The first thing we looked at was just policy 1.15, which is describing what each of these land use classifications allows. The commercial professional land use, which is the existing land use of the property, has a maximum FAR of 1.0. You'd be looking at a maximum commercial square footage of 10,000 square feet. That was a typo, I apologize. And we do not allow for any residential units within the CP designation. And if it was changed to the single-family residential designation, you'd be looking at a density of 1 single-family home. So then we looked at this site based upon the sort of existing future land use classification of commercial to see whether it was a good classification or an appropriate classification for this property. The first policy we looked at is policy 1.13, which is our commercial nodes policy. This policy is looking to locate commercial development at or along commercial nodes within the city. And we discussed previously that the property is located along the site is within a block that is at the intersection of Embers Parkway and El Dorado Boulevard. One is a minor arterial and the other is a collector. So those are both roads have 2 or more lanes going along with them. Staff finds that these are classified as both major roadways. And so staff finds that because the site is in a block that is at a direct intersection of this commercial node and the CP land use is established throughout that block, staff finds that the site is located at a commercial node. Next one we looked at was policy 1.14, which are the siting guidelines. These are 8 guidelines that try to give us some direction on whether or not properties or blocks are good candidates for commercial development. Staff finds that the site is consistent with 2 of these guidelines. One of those is major intersection, which goes back and ties into that commercial node criteria, and the other is the compactness. You're looking at a relatively compact, rectangular, 10,000 square foot parcel. Staff finds that the site is not consistent with 5 guidelines, which are intrusion, assembly, access, ownership pattern, and integration. A lot of the inconsistency with those deals to the fact that the site is small and has not been assembled. As you would get into perhaps larger sites that would have the ability for assemblage, some of these would go from not consistent to partially consistent or consistent. But since it is just one site, it's hard to analyze, it's hard to find one individual 10,000 square foot parcel as meeting some of these guidelines because we are obviously ideally looking for larger parcels with this. And then staff finds that the site is partially consistent with one guideline, which is adequate depth. While this is on the back half of a property that's undeveloped, staff did note in our analysis of the area that there are 3 parcels that front along El Dorado Boulevard that are also undeveloped, so that there would be some possibility for an assemblage to give that adequate depth that we're looking for, the 250 feet in the future. And the staff notes that policy 1.14 does not require a proposed amendment to meet a certain number of threshold of guidelines for approval or denial. These are merely sort of an advisory or a way to analyze properties to see whether or not they fit for good commercial use. So then we also kind of looked at this, whether or not it was appropriate for single family or for commercial professional. And staff, when we looked at this, we noted that it's one parcel with one owner in a block that has a direct intersection of 2 major roadways. Block 3960 does have some resident development, especially on that south side where this property is located, and also has a couple of abutting homes to the north or south. When we made this change, we looked at this block as an opportunity to provide for commercial development at an intersection of 2 major roadways, and development, commercial opportunities north of Pineland Road, especially in these areas sort of in the central or east, central areas of the city. We really don't have a lot of areas that are designated for commercial development, and we are always looking for ways to bring in areas that could be developed and brought up to provide for goods, services, employment opportunities, so people aren't driving 15, 20, 25 minutes in the northern central portion of the city to get to these areas that can provide, for goods, services, and jobs. Staff notes that if you look at the site individually by itself, it's challenging for commercial. There are opportunities for assemblage with 3 undeveloped parcels that are located along El Dorado Boulevard. And that's really what we're sort of looking at, is hopefully that in the future, especially as utilities are getting closer to being brought into this area, that you'll see some assemblage that occurs, and then you'll see some of these, more of these blocks that have that sort of commercial node criteria would develop into commercial sites. And then the last note is that staff finds that the land use change could be considered spot land use, as you basically have one single family residential land use parcel in a block where the remainder of it has that land use of commercial professional. And then staff notes that, if you start taking these individual sites piecemeal and breaking them out and changing them one at a time to a different land use that's already established within the block, you're really sort of negating any sort of future ability to develop these blocks with commercial uses. So based upon all that analysis, our recommendation is denial of the request to amend the site to the single family land use designation, and we received 1 phone call of general inquiry on this. I'm here for any further questions.
Mr. Boyko, thank you. Does the applicant have a presentation they'd like to provide for the commission? Seeing none, we'll turn it over to public input. This is a public hearing. If anybody would like to come and speak at the podium, please direct yourself and state your name for the record. Seeing none, we'll close citizens' input. We'll bring it to the commission. Is there any member comment? Commissioner York?
Thank you. So this property was purchased in what they call the tax deed sale for apparently back taxes in just last year, 2023. And it was purchased with a future land use already of commercial professional.
Correct.
And oftentimes we talk, as we should, being Planning and Zoning Commission, about the rights of the property owner versus the good of the city, which is really for all of us. And I always feel like in this kind of a case, when you purchase it, when it already has a future land use of commercial professional, you're right, that the weight would go, I think, against giving you a change of the future land use. I think the property owner's rights, if you will, they're sort of diminished in this kind of a case. And we all know that that there is a real shortage, particularly this part of the city, of the commercial land use over there. And so we're attempting to at least preserve some of it to service the homes that are already there. So, anyway, the other thing I was thinking about, and a question I have for you is, that even though this property faces 24th Place, it does, as you said, back up to property that's on the sort of major road, El Dorado, and it really, if there's some assemblage going on, it could service that property, right? Since it abuts it?
Yeah, it could. Yeah, I mean, we've seen, when you are able to achieve full block depth on these sites, when you can have, if you're looking at these blocks such as this, when you've got a 250-foot depth block, if you can achieve sort of acquiring both properties, you can utilize those back half properties for stormwater areas, you can utilize them for parking. This site does have an alleyway, so you could presumably have another access way into the site where you would come down the alley and then park behind the building and then walk across in front of the building. It would allow for some options of development rather than if you are only limited to the 3 parcels that are on El Dorado Boulevard, you're basically looking at just straight up strip commercial development of a small scale.
Right, okay. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Severson.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at the map here, we've got properties adjacent to either side. Were those previously CP designation for zoning?
Those, if they were built previous to the commercial professional yes, they were built previous to 2019 when the change was done to CP. So they didn't come in after the change to CP had been made. They were done previously.
So this is the first time we've addressed a property that has been, in this particular case, I'm assuming that this property probably went to forfeiture because there was nothing they could do to develop it as a single-family home, and it didn't look viable for a commercial professional.
I mean, possibly, but I don't want to speculate on whether or not that's the case or not.
So my other question was, in this area, are these water sources for these residents wells?
Yes.
And what's the water table situation in this particular? Do we have any kind of dynamics on that?
I would not be at any sort of level of expertise to analyze that. I mean, I know that in general discussions, it kind of rises and falls based on what the rainy season is like previously. I know that, like I said, if you speak to the utilities folks, I think in this case, it's somewhat irregardless of the change because in order to do commercial in the future, you're going to need water and sewer. So I'm sure that, this could support a single-family house from a well perspective, but it won't matter if it stays as commercial. It's not going to. You'll always have to develop this with water and sewer. So you have to wait for those uses to come in for this to develop in its current land use that it has now.
And that follows on my last question, and that is, so the individual that put in for the change of designation on this has not submitted plans for a single-family home yet.
They have submitted, and that's why it was brought about. They must have been unaware of the commercial professional designation, and then they applied for a building permit, and then it was rejected and voided out due to the commercial professional future land use designation.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Do we have any other comments from the commission? Commissioner York?
I actually do. So the fact that someone is unaware of the future land use is really not an excuse for anything, is it?
I mean, what we try to look at is, everyone, if they apply for something, they're all entitled to due process. So whether they're unaware, whether they were aware, we don't necessarily, that doesn't necessarily weigh into the analysis based on the comprehensive plan. There's not like a section that states, was this, did the person purchase this afterwards and then they get negative points for, for their request. That being said, we do note that, we just make it known that the applicant did purchase it, with the existing
Right.
CP designation.
Right.
And that, hopefully in the future, we will get the rezoning done also to a commercial professional office designation, and then the site will be fully consistent.
I worry for too long in this city, and I don't know, it's just my opinion, that people purchase pieces of land thinking, oh, it's a no-brainer. I'm just gonna get this changed. And I think we have to be aware of our own obligation to do what's right for the city. And so with that, I'll leave it at that, actually. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other comments from the commission? Seeing none, I would tend to, we don't want to rely on assumptions, but there's a clear assumption to be made that this property probably did go to a tax deed sale because it was incapable of being developed as either single-family residential or as a commercial project, because it's simply, the buffering alone wouldn't allow it to. So you'd have to have some sort of, accumulation of that land. To the north, you have a developed, newer construction, single-family home. To the south, you have the same. To the west, you have the same as well. It is that constant battle between property owners' rights and what's best for the city. Regarding these, we've seen several of these situations over the last 2 years, and we certainly can't put our finger on the scale because they purchased this property and it had this future zoning, or actually inconsistent zoning and future land use map designation. And even if you wanted to, for this particular property, one of the city's statements during the presentation was that this would be spot zoning, which would make this 10,000 square foot parcel different. However, most likely over the next 5-10 years, you're going to see these property owners with the single family homes to the north and to the south run into issues when they want to refinance their home, when they want to sell their home and try to get a mortgage on it. It's something that we've seen throughout the city, that lenders do look at the inconsistent land use. You can also run into problems obtaining insurance, rebuilding a home if it catches on fire. I think that this is a larger issue than just with this undeveloped 10,000 square foot lot. I think this is something that the majority of these single family homes in that area and throughout the city are going to be dealing with when they were brought from a residential to a commercial. With that said, of course, it was done for the right reason, and it was done to accumulate more commercial land, which we need, certainly. And I think this has to be done as nitpicky as it's going to be on a case-by-case basis, looking at each individual lot. And to me, this one, I see where the city's coming from, but this is never going to be, it's very difficult to see this being developed as a commercial property. So essentially, this land will be, the value will be substantially diminished and remain diminished until, 20, 30 years down the road, maybe when those other homes are torn down and accumulated. With that said, I do think that this is a situation where we have to lean more towards the private rights of the property owners and keep that in mind. And if we don't have anything else from the commission, do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to deny.
Motion to deny. We have a motion to deny ordinance 6524 made by Commissioner Apkeen, a second by Botana. Madam City Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Apking,
Aye.
Botana. Aye. Marker,
Nay.
Severson,
Nay.
York. Aye. Martin,
Aye.
Summers,
Nay.
4 ayes, 3 nays, motion carried.
Thank you. All right. I believe we had 2 other items on the agenda. The city will be able to discuss this. I think those are going to be moved to a later meeting.
Good morning, Commissioners. For the record, Anthony Santor, Senior Planner, Cape Coral City Planning Services. You are correct, both Ordinance 66-24 and Ordinance 67-24. Due to a procedural error, those will be heard and presented at the October 2nd regular meeting of the Planning Commission. Stand by for any questions that you may have.
Thanks so much.
Understood?
Okay, that'll finish business for this meeting. We'll move on to item 7, that's citizens' input. If there's any members of the audience that wish to speak, please direct yourself to the podium. State your full name for the record. Seeing none, we'll close citizens' input. Finally, we'll end with our time and date of the next meeting. The next regular meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission is scheduled for Wednesday, October 2nd at 9 a.m. in council chambers. With that, do we have a motion to adjourn? Motion to adjourn. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? This meeting's adjourned.